So what I want to talk to you today is informed by two small quotes. The first from Thich Nhat Hanh, who says that mindfulness must be engaged. Once we see that something needs to be done, we must take action. Seeing and action go together. Otherwise, what is the point in seeing? Something from a different perspective from Dr. James Gordon, who runs a Mind-Body Institute in the northern part of the Americas. When we see grand and vulgar self-absorption, it invites us all to examine our own selfishness. Ignorance calls us to attend to our own blind spots. The fears and isolation promoted goad us to be braver and more generous. Some of you may know of or have heard of Viktor Frankl. Viktor Frankl was an Austrian psychiatrist, a member of the Jewish community, and a Holocaust survivor. Following his liberation from Dachau in 1945, he wrote a book about his experiences and a new existential approach to therapy called logotherapy. Using his experience, Frankl talks about three major movements that occur during crises that impact our lives. The entry into a crisis is often marked by shock, as we are ushered into a new normal. Once we're firmly in the reality of a crisis or life situation, apathy takes over. Now, rather than this apathy as an opposite of love, as we often talk about in theological circles, apathy here refers to a state of self-defense in order to maintain one's humanity. In this stage, we're often stripped down to the most basic level of what is meaningful to us. In addition, our inner life intensifies. Finally, there is a moment of liberation when meaning-making can begin to occur again. Today, we live within contexts where there are existential concerns. They are the crises of meaning and communication and time and remembering. They are also the crises of action, where we walk a fine line between short-term and long-haul movement. In the short term, we often look for the most bang for the buck. Where will I protest? When will I engage? How do I speak up? Why am I in school when there is so much work to be done? How am I going to finish this quarter? Am I good or smart enough to be here? Why can't I say what I need to say in this sermon? For the long haul, we entertain broader themes. Who will I become as a person, a leader, a supporter, a pastor, a prophet? Am I willing to look inside myself at all of who I am, of who we are, so that we might become all that we can be? We have choices to make based on what we see and where we can act. Stay in the short term too long, and we might find brief success, but lose ground on creating larger scale changes that need to permeate the fabric of the communities to which we belong. Yet when we only live for the long haul, we ignore the pain of people in the present and lose credibility and relevance, along with opportunities to be compassionate to one another. A couple of weeks ago, our family walked to our normal pew at church and lightly exploded into the space. In a matter of seconds, one child was curled up in the corner reading a book. Our coats, purses, and other paraphernalia were piled in the other corner of the pew. Our youngest child sat surrounded by papers and markers and envelopes filled with scribbles and swirls as she colored in a dollar store princess coloring book. Her shoes lay on the floor and her legs swung back and forth off the edge of the pew. As the service progressed, we drew nearer to the children's message, and we asked our youngest if she wanted to go up. She nodded slightly and smiled. We then proceeded to tell her that she has to put on her shoes before she can go up, and she refused. Well, we explained, you can't go up without wearing shoes. So either you put on your shoes and go up for the message, or you keep them off and stay in the pew. Those are your only two choices. No, they're not. She stated simply, without missing a beat or even looking up at us. We were stunned by the pronouncement as we bit our tongues in that moment. How will I affect the world around me? And who do I need to become in order to make that work a reality? It's a question with more answers and possibilities that we can count. It is something that can ground us in short-term action and long-term seeing. There are choices to be made, some simple, some complex, but they are as distinct as each one of us. The key is that we answer it in the first place, that we ask it in the first place, and that we lean in rather than out of life. One of my early supervisors taught me that people come into spaces with grand stories about their anxieties. These anxieties often push others away or seek to protect them from the pain in their lives. Our role as therapists was one of discernment, of finding the brief glimpse of courage or strength that allows people to lean into those stories. And if we discern well, some of the fallacies that are created in those narratives begin to crumble. Leaning in, she told me, is difficult. But that once we are able to do it, we will see that the unsurmountable barriers of our own construction are little more than paper walls. And the fortresses of our solitude that we build are nothing more than houses of cards. Truth be told, the last few months have been shocking. It has been an introduction to life that few of us thought probable. This shock is beginning to wear off, though. And as an astute colleague pointed out, there are places where silence and separation are creeping into our lives. Frankel's wave of apathy is coming. But we must decide, we must choose what kind of apathy it will be. Will it function as an antidote to love, further separating us? Or will it strip us of the fluff we use to protect ourselves, to help sharpen our values and what gives our lives meaning? Apathy can prepare us for a coming liberation. It can put us in a state of mind where we believe liberation impossible. It can numb us to another and their pain. It can clarify our values and push us to become more. There are more than two choices here. And in the multitude of choices, I am going to hope for a coming liberation. I hope for the gentle nudge or the unwavering ally or the internal resilience needed to lean in against my own paper walls. And if you hope for that same liberation, I believe there are ways that we can prepare ourselves. Like every good preacher, I have 3 of them, but the only poem you're going to get is the haiku on the bulletin. The first thing we can do to prepare for liberation is to be compassionate. It's a self-compassion that allows for mistakes while entertaining our gifts and strengths. And a worldly compassion that rips through paper walls of isolation that we and others erect. As former Iliff student and current VA chaplain Tiffany Andes put it on Facebook recently, and I have permission to share this. I get asked a lot why I chose to leave active duty to do what I do. The answer to that is complicated and nuanced. A significant part of it includes the drive to give back to others, to stop being a cog in the machine, and to work toward the goal of human connection. I had a veteran today say to me, "Chaplain, you are the first person to ever just sit and listen to me. You don't judge what I've done or been through, you're just there. This is why I do what I do. In our political climate and in the uncertainty of our future, I want to be there for people who need someone to listen. What are you doing to foster human connection? What are you doing that can feed your spirit and your heart?" The second way we can prepare for liberation is by being creative. Ann Peterson, a feminist and process theologian, remarked that creativity is a social process that requires a social context. Creativity occurs within the natural rhythms and happenings of everyday life. We are designed to be creative. We feel good when we discover something new, and novelty is necessary for the future of who we are as a species on this planet. Our future is emergent, not predetermined by our past. Thus, I think we need to push back from the table that says creativity is an individual set of special talents, and claim rather that creativity is a way of seeing and interacting with our experiences in the world. The final way we can prepare for liberation is through connection. A recent Washington Post article described the effects of loneliness this way. Loneliness, long a bane of humanity, is increasingly seen today as a serious public health hazard. Scientists who have identified significant links between loneliness and illness are pursuing the precise biological mechanisms that make it such a menace, digging down to the molecular level and finding that social isolation changes the human genome in profound, long-lasting ways. Not only that, but the potential for damage caused by these genetic changes appears to be comparable to the injuries to health from smoking. The scientists' conclusion: loneliness can be a lethal risk. And the United States, which so prizes individuality, is doing far too little to alleviate it. The longest-running psychological study on happiness published one simple conclusion based on what they learned over 75 years of interviews. When controlling for other environmental and physical factors, the greatest predictor of happiness and longevity in life was a person's relationships with others. Good quality relationships heal and promote health. In short, love others and yourself. Live imaginatively and cultivate a way of seeing the new in the world. And finally, be together. Find people to love who love you back, and lean in and on one another.